I see some familiar names coming on in, and they'll continue to trickle in. It's really great to see all of you again. Welcome to Now and Their Asks. This is our conversation series. I'm Kate Gilbert. I use she, her as my pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of Now and There, and I'll be moderating this conversation. Today marks the first part of this new series where we'll work with 8 Boston communities to ask, what does your neighborhood need right now? No small question. Today's session begins with Boston's oldest city, Charlestown. I'm super excited to have here Charlestown Coalition Director Sarah Coughlin and Youth Prevention Coordinator from the same coalition, Mswati Hanks, along with Boston artist Maria Molteni. Before we really do get into this conversation, I want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded land of the Massachusetts people. We acknowledge the Massachusetts people, past, present, and future. And this conversation about the history of Charlestown must acknowledge it was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples. So this program has been created to offer a supportive and proactive space for artists, cultural producers, community leaders, the public, all of you, in the face of this physical distancing and public retreat. And we are aiming to bring together all of us in dialogue to talk about what's happening now in Boston neighborhoods, especially to listen better on my behalf and as part of Now and There, and really to encourage action. So we're gonna do this format is similar to the last one's 30-minute conversation that I'll moderate, followed by 30 minutes of community dialogue that Mary Liz will moderate. We do want to include your voices in the discussion, as always. As your questions come up, use the question and answer signal at the bottom. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves. We do really want to make sure that this is a conversation for all. The slight tweak is that we'll be giving some examples and really want to get this beyond the conversation to some hopefully action items that you all can take to support either Charlestown, your own neighborhood, your own growth and development, your practice, those around you. So let's get started with this tough question of what does Charlestown need right now? I've only recently come to know Charlestown Coalition's mission, and I'm super excited that you guys are here with us. The mission, as I read it, is to advance communities and transform lives by developing and supporting activities that promote overall health and bring about change. Big word in our mission too. Helping to end the cycles of addiction, poverty, violence, and racism. The coalition was founded in 2004 by residents and community partners in response to the devastating opioid epidemic and overdose related deaths, especially among young people. As they adapted to meet the needs of Charlestown, their work has expanded, focusing on stable housing, healthy food, racial equity, and access to mental health services, to name a few. And that is Sarah and Mswati are here from that coalition. And then Maria Molteni is a Nashville to Boston-based multimedia and performing artist, educator and organizer. I've had the pleasure of working with her many years ago at the Lawn on D, and it's been really exciting to see your career expand from there. Having studied painting and printmaking at Boston University, her practice sprung from formalist roots and has grown to incorporate research, social engagement, transdisciplinary experimentation. Maria is a problem solver via traditional methods of craft and the tactile and tactical, and her works introduce original or absurdist processes as applied aesthetic solutions. And there's an example of her work right behind her. We usually start this conversation with a quick check-in with our attendees here. There's a nice healthy 43 of you. I think we can put up a poll right now. It's good to know just where you're coming from, and have you ever been to Charlestown? What is your experience? What is your associations there? We'll get that going along. And I want to just start jumping right into our questions. So as this group knows, I did too much research, and there are Google Docs full of the challenges that Charlestown has faced. And among them are the way that Charlestown has been cut off geographically through bridges and urban renewal, and also the sense of the code of silence and taking care of your own, which some trace back to the Irish roots. I think it'd be good for Sarah, for you to start with telling us more about the opioid crisis and how the Charlestown Coalition got started, and really where you came into it, maybe even beginning with your involvement with the police department.
Sure, sounds good. So I'm Sarah Coughlin and thrilled to be here this afternoon. And I'm not from Charlestown, but I've worked there in the community for the last 13 years, and it feels like I'm from there. It's a very unique and tight-knit community and has so many strengths and resilience, but it has a long history of racial and economic divisions that have really impacted the health of the community. So I started my career in Charlestown out of the Boston Police Department, working with juveniles that were court involved and receiving referrals through the police department. I covered all of downtown, 11 neighborhoods in Boston, but 90% of my referrals came from Charlestown. And I'd say 90% of those referrals came from one section of the 1 square mile community, which is the highest health disparities. We have the highest number of children living in deep, deep poverty, which is 200% below the federal poverty line. What that means is a family average household income is about $14,000 for a family of 4. And it is located right next to a growing, gentrified, very wealthy, affluent folks coming into the community, where 750 square foot condos are going for, upwards of millions of dollars. And so the experience of that disparity is really mirrored in a 1 square mile community of what we're seeing sort of systemically and nationwide in terms of health disparities. And it's never more present now in the times that we are faced, where an awakening of what's always existed is occurring. And so I moved from the police department because I was feeling like I was getting pathologized for working with youth that were more environmental issues. And so I wanted to move upstream a bit, and moved over to MGH, which the coalition formed in 2004. After, in 2003, the 1 square mile community had the highest fatal overdose rates in Massachusetts. Young people were dying left and right from opiate overdose, and reached out to the hospital for support. So our coalition is supported through Mass General's Center for Community Health Improvement, and we're geared to work on social determinants. And what that means is that we address the community's needs as identified by the community. We don't come into the community and say, this is what you need. We do really thorough focus groups, community health needs assessments, surveying to really identify what the needs are. And so the needs have evolved over time. We started really as a sole focused on addiction. Our name used to be the Charlestown Substance Abuse Coalition, and we've morphed to the Charlestown Coalition to address all social determinants of health and all of those things that Kate had explained a little bit earlier. But as a white woman coming into a community where I'm asked, initially through the police department, working predominantly with kids of color that are in the development, which is upwards of 90%, although the larger community is 70% white. And so a lot of issues that I think are related to everything that's going on in the world right now, but just sort of that division and really separate communities within each community, and a lot of issues tied to that, which I can elaborate on. But
I really appreciate you coming in and starting the conversation by saying that you don't come in and say what a community needs. And I wonder if I can throw this over to Mswati right now. How do you get especially the youth's participation in learning what a community needs? And do they come willingly, like ready to tell you, or are they suspect at all? How does that work?
Yeah, good question. I think the main thing with engaging youth is really just talking to them like I would talk to an adult, right? And valuing and validating their opinions, their feelings, their experience, their truth. And I think at first they don't necessarily understand what's going on in the community, especially from the larger systemic aspects. But I think once we educate them on that, I mean, they're so on board, right? They've already felt the effects of kind of community, what community means, what community doesn't mean to them, how community is accessible to other people. So once they really learn about the systemic effects and they learn about what's going on in their own community, I think it's natural in young people that they want fight. They want to fight for change. They want to rebel. They want to do anything that they can to, I think, change their circumstance. So I think the main thing of just getting them to buy in is educating them, right? And making them understand that this is what's going on in the community, even if you see it or not. And then they're fully bought in, you know?
Do you specifically use, here our poll results are in, we're sort of split, not that familiar, people, and our attendees here, pretty familiar. I visit often at 46%, tied with sort of my knowledge may be colored by the movies. Some of those, most of those movies are not very positive. Mswati, do the youth watch those movies? And when you talk about what's going on and you're talking about the systemic challenges, be they racism or economic disparity, do you use those names?
It's funny, you would think that kids that grow up their whole lives in Charlestown would be kind of drawn to these movies or watch them, but to tell you the truth, I think because most of our kids are people of color, those movies don't portray their lives, right? I think Charlestown has a history of, at one point, being the bank robbery capital, you know, of the country. And so I think a lot of that highlights, you know, the townies, right? The generational, people have been there for generations, Irish American families. You know, the same with the kind of the mafia and gang stuff, you know? So a lot of the stuff doesn't portray the kids that we work their reality. So yeah, believe it or not, they don't, you know, we'll reference the movies and they really don't know what we're talking about. Yeah.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Maria, I want to invite you into the conversation, and there's a lot of parallels in your work that we can pull out, whether that's the work with youth that you've done in the basketball projects. But I was also thinking about your soft hajuk, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and a space that you went into as an outsider. And I'm curious how you engage in these conversations about who owns the space and invite other voices to that.
Yeah, well, it's, I mean, I really like working organically. And I think one of the reasons I say I'm a problem solver is because like every new context presents a different kind of issue and set of issues and partners, or, you know, sometimes I'm actually working with an organization, sometimes it's totally rogue and I'm just like showing up and trying to make friends. Sometimes that happens over many, many months through formal programming, and sometimes it's more through like hanging out and building trust, like very DIY. And so yeah, that's kind of, that's sort of an interesting and fun and risky and tricky part, is kind of putting all those pieces together and saying like, what's the best approach here? And not like assigning a particular approach, always sort of keeping it organic and always being flexible and willing to change. Because I think when you're working in a socially engaged way, you always have to be flexible in that way. Like I don't have a particular process or system, which also means that even these very elaborate, like here's one example of a basketball court mural I've done with a whole team of people. Like we don't have a design prepared going in, but what I do often have is sort of a prompt or an idea or research that I've done. And I think something that is really interesting about working in Massachusetts. So, I mean, most of the time I am invited, you know, to do something. And in the case in Croatia, I was invited by a queer collective there who also works in kind of a DIY way. So I was invited by a collective, and they even like funded my trip over, but still the way that we did the project was kind of like covert and DIY, which was really cool. But in Massachusetts, when I work in these different cities, like I'll be invited to do something in Salem or New Bedford or Fall River, there are always these kind of, you know, these sort of bleak traumatic histories that you're working with that call for and deserve a revisiting, and sort of a revisiting, learning how to educate yourselves on that history, and then also I like to say transmuting it into something different. Like I think, I don't think just putting a positive sort of Band-Aid over something is a good idea. For example, in Salem becoming Witch City, and it suddenly becomes like Samantha Bewitched and it's all cute and everything, is necessarily the solution. But I think like learning to embrace and reclaim certain histories and like represent it where you're keeping the bleakness in with like positivity is one approach. If that, I kind of talked all over the place. I don't know if you would like me to talk about a particular project or address more specifically how I work with youth.
No, I think those are all good segues for us. I just dropped in the chat a picture. Well, you said rogue. I think rogue is important at times. So I put an example of Nate Swain's work where he was making Zen gardens out of the rocks under the underpass. Another one is Krzysztof Wodiczko's work in 1998, and maybe Katie or Leah can drop that in the chat, where he did, Maria, do exactly that, which was to invite mothers and brothers of those who had been killed, violently killed without any police interaction during this code of silence, and they spoke. And their voices were projected on the Bunker Hill Monument. And it wasn't glossing over and making it, the Disney version. It was very painful. I don't know how many of you who are listening were part of that. I was there 2 of the 3 nights, and it was just so moving. And I think it seems like it did have an impact in getting that conversation started about the violence that was happening there. I think this is a good segue into the Peace Park. Sarah or Mswati, whoever wants to jump in, what are the goals of the Peace Park, and can you give us, like in 2 or 3 minutes, the what happened and where you're going from here?
Sure, I'm happy to start us off. So a few years back, we recognized there was several instances of community violence that had some racial undertones, and there's certain parts of the community, because it's so racially and economically divided, there are parts of the community that youth don't feel safe at. So youth of color oftentimes will not go to the main street side of the community. They don't feel welcomed or safe there. Kids from the sort of white side of the neighborhood oftentimes don't feel safe on the other side of the neighborhood. And so there was some community violence that took place. A couple of teenagers were tragically killed, and we were dealing with this real uproar in the community of multi-generational loss that's beginning from all of this overdose and all of this pain and trauma that was never really dealt with, and then the opioid epidemic really hit. And so folks were dealing with so much pain and so much division. And so the Peace Park was developed. We applied for a very small $2,700 grant through the city of Boston to develop an area in the community. And our idea was to make it a safe haven, to recognize the multi-generational pain that was lost, to have it as a peace park where we could memorialize those lives that were lost and bring people together with a shared underlying pain, that recognizing that we may not be able to connect on a whole lot of areas at this point because people were feeling so divisive, but that loss is loss, and that there was a shared experience with grief. And so we started developing the area. We picked an area on Mount Vernon Street, which is abuts the most expensive street to live on in Charlestown. Multi-million dollar condos on this side of town. And initially in the planning process, and at this point I had been in the community for 9 years or so, but working with our youth, we're saying, Sarah, we can't go on this side of town. They're not going to let us on this side of town. We're not welcome there. And that was heart-wrenching for me. And I said, this is your community. You've lived here longer than the people on this street. You're entitled to be in whatever area that you want to be. And we sort of had a lot of dialogue about it and moved forward. The park, we had several residents, one in particular, but was really spearheading this movement around, which I think really has all this underlying tone. It's not about one individual. It's not about a group of individuals. It's really about what we're dealing right now systemically as a society, that with this division comes this fear of the unknown. It comes like, what are these kids doing? And there's this fear of youth of color, particularly Black youth, being in a white affluent neighborhood, and the fear that's related for that for folks that are not used to seeing kids of color. And so we had a lot of pushback. We had people were calling the city on me, saying we didn't follow through with permitting. They were trying to halt it at every movement. I'm talking, this was a $2,700 project. We were painting chairs, benches, and cleaning up and weeding. And it was
share some photos while you talk.
It was a huge, huge problem for folks in that community. They took pictures of the park fences, reporting it to vandalism to the 311, the city of Boston. It was a real nightmare. But we persevered and we were working through it. I mean, they were coming down, taking photos of our kids when they were painting and cleaning up during the weekends, reporting them. And at one point I said to our youth, we need to process this. This is, they're watching particular women with BMWs driving by and filming them as they're painting the fence. And so what was a learning experience for me is one of the youth saying to me, Sarah, what do we need to, and he's one of my greatest teachers, Rashawn, and he said to me, Sarah, what do we need to process? Well, the only thing we need to process is why you're surprised about this. We told you this is not where we're welcome. And that was just, it's heart-wrenching, but it was a wake-up call to me that this was my uncomfortability with seeing what has been existing for decades and decades, what their personal life experience was. And it was, I didn't want it to be the reality, so it was uncomfortable for me to sit with, but it was not uncomfortable for them because it's a Tuesday for them, it's their life. And so that was a real wake-up call for me. And we really started moving forward, and we've done a ton of work around trying to get our youth engaged with civic engagement and trying to push and change the systemic nature of all of these challenges and changing the perception of youth and doing a lot of social marketing and social media campaigns to really try to get that changing in the hearts and minds within the community. But in the meantime, we had this horrible experience with the Peace Park, but it ended up being a really unifying work. So it ended up getting vandalized, and there's an open court matter right now that's pending for a particular defendant that was caught vandalized. All of the memorial rocks, we had thousands of memorial rocks that were painted with loved ones' names and had ceremonies for youth to grieve that. They were all gone. We had Martin Luther King quotes around unity and peace that were screwed to the park benches. Those were all screwed off and taken. The paint that we had paint the fences was gold. They repainted it black. And it was the color and thing that it was a real nightmare of a situation. But the community really rallied together. So after it was destroyed, we did a campaign around "We will rebuild and you won't stop us" type of campaign. And we were able in 1 week period of time to raise $12,000 from community residents, and 60% of that was between $20 and $40 donations. And so there was a huge support from the community around that, and the youth felt that they felt that there were people that were backing them, that there were white allies that were supportive of them, even though they felt unwelcome in this really affluent section of town. So we started to rebuild, we started to repair, we've gotten a lot of support around doing it. We're currently working with Cog Design, which is a pro bono firm, and developing plans to really make it a sustainable place for the original mission of bringing folks together and giving a place to sort of breathe and connect with one another. And so that's where we're at right now.
For public art? And is there room for public art?
We would love some public art in there, especially with some meaning and just creativity around how do we look at things differently? How can we start to really shape hearts and minds at a time right now, which is critical to act, where minds are open in ways that they haven't been for a long overdue. And I think we need to capitalize on that moment. And I think we have a real opportunity here to really make some significant. Yeah,
I think those numbers are telling. What did you say? 60% came between $20 and $40. And I was looking on there the other night, and there's $10 donations. I think we talked about this in our pre-call, and Maria or Mswati, I don't know which of you wants to pick this up, but what is it, do you think, that makes someone feel that they can speak or act on behalf of a community? And in this case, one or two people who felt that, threatened or fear of youth, especially youth, Black youth that don't look like them? And what is it about other people that, you know, they all think they're doing good, right? I don't know if you want to pick that up. You've both had experience with people speaking on behalf of a group.
I can speak real quick, but then I definitely want to yield to Maria because I think she has some really telling and, you know, poignant tales about people coming and, you know, espousing ownership over, you know, this place and feeling like they can speak for the larger community. But I think, you know, and if I can narrow it down to just the Peace Park, I think it's just, you know, privilege, right? I think it's, and I hate keep going back and saying, you know, systemic, but I think, you know, when life has told you your whole life, my life is worth more than, you know, these people, because I have more money, more access, that gives me more power, and, you know, my voice is in turn heard over your voice. And it has been like that, honestly, since the beginning of this country. So I think in the, you know, quick and short, I think it's just privilege, right? I just think so many people have had that message come to them in both sides, right? The kids tried to tell, and I love that story, the way Sarah tells it, because the kids tried to tell her, like, they don't want us over there. We're not welcome over there. And Sarah, being Sarah, couldn't understand, you know, well, what do you mean? This is your community. Like, you're part of, you've been here longer than them. But I just think on both sides, it's just been so ingrained that I'm worth this or I'm not worth as much. So, yeah, I would just say privilege, and I'll yield to Maria.
Yeah, it's kind of a complex question. I definitely think privilege and entitlement are a huge component. Sometimes there's like a sense of entitlement that comes from, or whether we want to call it entitlement or whatever else, but from feeling like you're not heard. Like, I think it could kind of be both ways. Like, someone could feel, could have all this privilege and always be listened to and be like, well, people always listen to me, so I'm going to tell you what to do. And in other cases, you have someone who feels like they have an opinion and no one hears them, and so they're more aggressive about expressing their opinion. So it's like complicated. And I don't want to take up too much time because I know we're close, but, you know, it's like I was saying the other day in our chat that, you know, I'm working on like these huge courts with a big crew of people. Most of our crews are like femme and queer and trans and, you know, sort of vulnerable in some ways in these spaces. Everyone involved is vulnerable. Like, the youth are vulnerable, you know, everyone has like their ways that they need to be protected and safe, made to feel safe. But you know, it's like, it's intense labor, and people will kind of come out of nowhere in the middle of working with like an opinion or sometimes an attack. And usually, I was saying, it tends to be of a homophobic nature, either because they see like what we sort of look like, the people who are working on the court, or even like literally, like, Boston cannot handle like a color spectrum without thinking it's like a gay rainbow or whatever. And I think we have every right to put rainbows on everything, but it's not even, you know, and people freak out. But so it's either kind of homophobic or sort of misogynist in nature, and coming from all directions. I mean, some people just get mad that we're not painting like the Celtics logo and everything. And that's a whole other story that I do get into with youth, especially because I'm really tired of children being, like, children's bodies being used as like advertising and propaganda. And I don't think that we should be like slapping like logos and jerseys on them all the time that are not coming from their own vision and their own experience. But yeah, it's interesting. And all I'll say is, like, I don't exactly have answers as to why people are doing this, or always even what to do about it when someone marches down and says, oh, I'm from this, or this, and what you're doing is a problem. But I think as we ask for systems like the police to be defunded or even abolished, and we are advocating for new systems of community like healing and management, or, you know, like self-run community systems, I think we have to think a lot about how we do that, like how, because we police one another as well. Like, how do we abolish the police in our mind, right? Is this like important thing that's coming up? And so how do we approach one another, and how do we start to, I mean, we have to work on ourselves. Like, we have to work on the racism and the misogyny and everything like embedded into ourselves. But I think we also have to work on like the police in ourselves, so that we can begin to like actually demonstrate models that can work instead of systemic police forces and things. So we're ready when there is defunding happening, which it's going to happen. It's gotta happen. We have other solutions being practiced, so.
So well said, Maria. I have, since you're the professed problem solver in the group here, I've got a big problem for you to start to chew on while we get ready for some Q&A from the group. This actually comes from a conversation I had with someone in the Charlestown Navy Yard, that the Tobin Bridge really just cuts right through Charlestown. Charlestown, as we said, is only a mile square. And that Navy Yard was a form of income for many, many residents. It was shut down in the 70s, I think 75, at the same time of busing, like a very traumatic time period. It has since become, you know, condos and the museums there. And I know the Charlestown Navy Yard, there are groups there that are trying very hard to make it a more welcoming space, but yet there's still this physical structure cutting the two across. And I just wonder if you have any ideas, or even just sort of more sort of from your manifesto or your thoughts about how do we do more of a both and about bringing both the, you know, the lower income communities and the youth and the wealthier together. And is there anything we can do with a giant like concrete and steel structure? You can pass. We can go on to Q&A.
Well, you know how I feel about like hard, you know, I mean, that's kind of my whole thing is like soft subversion. I mean, I don't think everything has to be soft, especially like forms of protest or whatever don't always have to be soft. But I think that my like MO is like there's like a strength in softness, because when you build something like a giant monument out of like steel or concrete, not that I don't love some of those things, but it's like the bigger it is, the harder it falls. When someone wants to destroy it, they feel more you know, they feel more of a sense of being this like champion that destroyed this big thing. Whereas if you make something kind of soft or ephemeral or something like, or sort of a moving target, so to speak, people feel silly trying to like destroy it. So that's why a lot of the things I make are ephemeral or cyclical or soft. Like they're meant to fall apart or self-destruct, so that not only can they adapt and maybe potentially be replaced or grow or change, but also someone can't pride themselves on like destroying it or removing it, because it's kind of like it's indestructible in its self-destruction or something. So I mean, I could take some time to think more about like permanent, you know, I mean, like the basketball courts are definitely semi-permanent and like monumental in scale, so I'm into that too. But I just wanted to like plug the
yeah. I love the thought of your of some sort of net that, you know, someone gets frustrated just trying to take it apart because it's so huge and soft and complex, like this conversation. So I want to invite Mary Liz to come on now and help us moderate some of these questions.
Yeah, so I have a few follow-up questions from some things that have come up in the chat, but for anybody who is on the line and would like to ask a question of any of our panelists live, please submit it through the Q&A function. And we will turn your mic on and let you ask. We definitely want to hear your voice on this call, so please submit through Q&A as we continue our conversation, and you can do that. So one of the things that came up in the chat, it looks like a community partner of the coalition, Ted, is on the line, and he was talking about how disappointed he was in the desecration of the Peace Park. And one of the things he said was that we have to prevent acts of aggression like this. And Mswati, I'd like to go to you with this question first, since you work directly with the youth who are longtime and generational members of the neighborhood, but are we in a place where we can prevent this yet? And if not, why not? And if so, how? Because that came up for me. I grew up in Everett, which is your neighbor right to the north. And so, I'm just wondering if you think this is preventable yet. Not that that's an excuse for having a park desecrated. Not all parks get desecrated in the city, we know that. But I'm just wondering, how did the youth feel this was preventable or inevitable, and how do we reckon with that?
Yeah, I think, well, one, I think the youth were very, I think they knew it was going to happen, right? They knew they weren't wanted over there, so they knew something was going to happen. They didn't know what it was, but their experience is that something always happens where it's either directly or indirectly we're told we're not wanted here. As to the question of it being preventable, I want to say yes, right? I'm an eternal optimist, glass half full type of guy, but I think, so complete transparency, the whole Peace Park debacle, the initial Peace Park where people were really showing the kids they weren't wanted there, that was before I got there. I've been in this role for 1.5 years now. And since I've been, we have like rebuilt the Peace Park. We've, made a lot of community connections. But my main goal coming in, because I knew about this Peace Park issue and I knew about the 2 Charlestowns and the wealth disparity. And so my main mission was to bridge the 2 communities, right? I wanted the youth of Turn It Around to be seen as kids, right? Not kids of color, not as a threat, but just kids, just teenagers. So I wanted them, so I've been doing a lot of different things to expose them to the rest of the community. We do scavenger hunts.
You're frozen, Mswati.
Kids happen to Oh no, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, now you're good.
Okay.
There's a tiny moment.
Did you hear about the scavenger hunt?
No, the scavenger hunt time, go! I love the scavenger hunt.
One of the things I did when I came was I started doing scavenger hunts with the kids, and they would have to take selfies with our neighbors. And my favorite part of that is that the neighbors who didn't look like our kids would have these huge smiles on their face, right? And the kids would have their Turn It Around sweatshirts and t-shirts on, and it was basically showing the community, look, there's nothing to fear. These are kids, and I understand when you fear things that are different, right? So when you ask if it's preventable, yes. And the way it's preventable is by exposing the 2 communities to each other, having the 2 communities work with each other. We just did a cleanup at the Peace Park 2 weeks ago. And when I tell you, we had members from every realm of the community, clergy members, neighbors, state reps, like everyone came out to help and just show that we are one Charlestown. So yeah, is it preventable? Yes, and I think that's the way, at least the way we're going about preventing it.
That's great. And it's about putting in work in your neighborhood and learning who your neighbors are. Yeah. Exactly. That makes me feel so hopeful. We have a question here from Susan that sort of builds on this. And I think Maria, it'll come to you first, but I bet Sarah or Mswati, you'll have some ideas on this, and Kate, you might too. So Susan, I am going to turn your microphone on, just 1 second. So this question's from Susan Cox, and you should be good to go, Susan.
Hi, I didn't really imagine. It's nice to be here today and hearing everybody. And I was really struck by Maria's discussions and experience about the different ways in which people speak for the community. And I wanted to hear more about how you might, sort of, I guess, fairly weigh all the different voices in this discussion. And I can imagine some voices are louder than others, demanding attention that can maybe drown out, you know, the voices of the people who are less, I don't know, comfortable, privileged, whatever you want to say about speaking up for the community, and but really should have a louder voice in the discussion at this point.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think a big, I'm very transparent with my process and like in real time. So I think that's one way I'm able to respond to. So a lot of times, like I said, I'm in the middle of working on a basketball court, and I may have, like, for example, one of the basketball courts, and I may have worked on the project for like 8 months with after school program youth, or it might have been a few days that I came and hung out at the park, kind of depending on the program and the budget and all of that. It's like we show our math, we show our work. I try and find ways, not only ways of prompting the community and engaging the community, so that there's like some guiding of creativity and how they express themselves. Like, you know, I'll literally put chalkboards up on the fence so people well, actually not for this court. This court we worked with a middle school, but there was a court in Dorchester we worked on. The project is called Heart in the Paint, and we did do drawings in after school programs with youth that were already part of the program, but it's such a huge neighborhood, and the court is like the central point of such a huge community, that we also put chalkboards up on the fence so that people could draw stuff that they wanted put in the court, almost like to order. Like they would draw shapes, and we'd just sort of put it in. I mean, of course we were careful about not painting anything offensive, right? But like, most of it's just abstract shapes and things. And then when someone walks up and says, well, first of all, I'll also say I do like an organic community process that centers young people, because I don't think that adults always know what young people need or want. And, you know, they're kind of closed-minded. Like, I don't know, about what you can paint on a basketball court or what you can do in the world, period. So I center the young people. And then if someone walks up and says like, well, what is this? This looks like gay. I mean, people have literally accused me of hiding gay symbols in the courts. And I can just say, well, like, I can just show my math or whatever, show the process, be really transparent, say, well, look at the fence, look at all these drawings people have done, look at what they're drawing on the board, look at what we're painting. Like, you know, we're sourcing this imagery from the community. And I mean, you just have to be careful about giving people too much of your energy too, because sometimes it's a bit of a trap, right? And if they're going to come up to you right in the middle of when you're working, and if someone can't at least appreciate how much like physical labor you're putting into something, if they don't at least like notice that, how hard you're working, because I like actually paint these myself, that's a little bit of a cue too, that there might be a certain type of privilege or like an overlooking of that, because just because you're putting in physical labor doesn't mean everything you're doing is right. But it's like, maybe we should talk about this when I'm not like sweating and managing a huge team and clearly trying to get through my work day. But yeah, you can just figure out sort of how much energy to give people and whether or not this is something that needs to be kind of settled after the fact. But yeah, like being really, I'm just so transparent with my process. I think that's super important.
Thank you. We have a second question here from Helen, which is a great question. It's a logistical question. Sarah, I think you can answer this. Helen, you should be all set to speak and ask your question.
Hi. Well, in some ways, I guess it's a question that was answered by Maria in regards to her work. It's exciting to hear about some of her process, because you know, you always see these images of her work and you're like, oh my God, how did she manage all of that? And it's like, oh, with all this input and all these other people. But I was just curious about those same sorts of questions in regards to the park. I keep telling myself, oh, they had so little money, but I'm wondering about what else, you know, went into the planning stages, who was invited to the table, and what kind of experiences they had or were invited to bring, and so on. Yeah, it's a pretty open.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk on that. So our coalition is made up of where there's a federal guidelines around coalition development and community coalition work, and you have to have 12 key stakeholders around the table, and that's representative law enforcement, healthcare providers, youth, family, faith-based organizations, businesses, you know, et cetera. So we have planning meetings within that group that are representative in the community. So we had real steering committee meetings that were planful in this. And then we sent out, this is prior to the destruction, sent out advertisements in the local newspaper saying, that goes under everybody's door, saying that this was happening, and if people wanted to get involved, that they could contact us. We didn't receive any responses from folks on the actual Mount Vernon street at that time. It was only after we started painting, but the doors were open for folks to come at the table initially. Right now, with where we're at in terms of the rebuild, Cog Design developed a survey that we've put out on SurveyMonkey and blasted out through the community, and also, which is very challenging during COVID, but working to sort of pound the pavement a little bit more for folks that don't have internet access. When we usually do community health assessments, we're doing them in multi-languages, pamphlets, surveys, focus groups, a host of means to ensure that we have all voices at the table, or means to have voices. So it's a little bit more challenging now with COVID, but we're invested in trying to get as many voices at the table as possible. So we're using local media, social media, newspaper, and then we're going to host open community meetings so that design plans can sort of, a dialogue can take place so we can get as much feedback as possible.
Cool. That sounds exciting and seems like it could potentially, you know, really lay a great foundation.
Totally, very timely. I think there's a lot we've seen in the last 3 weeks, a huge outreach from the white affluent community wanting to reach out. I think we've done a really good job about making our small subgroup of youth very visible in the community. And I think it speaks to how invisible the rest of the youth of color are in the community, because we tend to be targeted by all of these organizations now, and sort of residents that have seen our social media or seen our youth and want to get involved. So that's a great thing. And I think the more that we can do that, we can say that it's not just these 40 kids that are in our youth group, but it's this entire community as well, and really start getting to what Mswati was speaking of early in terms of proximity and getting folks to engage with one another.
And I mean, it makes me wonder, I guess maybe one risk of opening things up so much is that certain people in the end get cut out. So I guess I'm wondering if there is, are there ways in which you're making sure that the youth who seem to be like a primary focus of the project remain involved, or get, you know, increased opportunities to sort of formulate their own design ideas? Or yeah, I'm just wondering how you balance everyone that it sounds like is going to be involved. If I'm allowed another question, I understand if, you know, we have.
No, absolutely. And it's a really great question, because it's very challenging in terms of community work. And we have a lot of experience in sort of lessons learned and making a whole lot of mistakes early on when the coalition formed, especially working around addiction and sort of how any need of the community, trying to sort of ensure that how do you find common ground? But I think because the mission of what the youth developed initially is such a common thread, that's the core mission that is non-negotiable, right? Like, so that's really what the mission of this park is, in terms of a sanctuary, a space, because some of the residents wanted it to be, well, one wanted it to be a parking lot, but second wanted it to be like having phone charger stations and water equipment for youth, or you know, just having a different vision of the park. And I think the way that we've framed it in terms of how do we redevelop the Peace Park with this mission, and what are your ideas around this mission, so that the core of what the youth develop, the reason that we are establishing it in the first place, why we got the permits, which are still under our name and organization, that mission is not being altered. It's just, we want to get as much feedback from the larger community as to how that looks like, when it happens, what would be helpful for everyone, but that sanctuary of a place to grieve and remember and be together under this unifying concept of loss and pain and healing and resilience is something that's non-negotiable.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Helen. I see Wen Hao, you have your hand raised, and if you have a specific question, I would love for you to just send it our way in the Q&A so that I can turn on your microphone. So I see you. I just need you to submit your question. And I have a quick follow-up. We've talked so much about youth because that's an intersection, Maria, with your work and the coalition's work, but I would love to hear, Sarah, maybe from you first, how adults, and I'm thinking mostly in terms of the parents of the people who are your youth, interact with the coalition, and how you serve them, and also draw the community together. It can be easy to draw communities together around youth and do what Mswati said about breaking down fear, because kids are kids, and if we can show people, adults, that these kids are kids, they're less likely to be fearful and to get to know them. How does that trickle up to their parents getting to know their neighbors better? How do the parents come to you with issues? Because adults and adults is a different thing. And so what are the tensions that are still present in Charlestown, and how are you guys sort of addressing some of those things?
That's a really good question as well, and certainly an area where we need to improve on. Some of the barriers that we face is language capacity. A lot of our youth's families, English is not their primary language, and so our staffing, we have to work on doing a better job of diversifying in terms of language capacity. And so that tends to be a barrier at points, but we really work hard to engage all of the families. So we let them know about the turnaround. We send consent forms for everything in terms of getting involved in the group. Mswati connects with everybody's parents and has a relationship with them in a very active and engaged way. We send out a monthly newsletter to the parents highlighting a youth of the month that gets mailed out to their homes. We have a parent resource guide that goes out to folks as well. We have a lot of folks, so the Peace Park was not just the youth that we're developing it either. There were a lot of parents and folks from the townie population. There were, the old Irish Catholic kind of population. There were folks from the business community. There were healthcare providers. There was a whole lot that went in. It just seemed to be that the youth were the problem in terms of what was identified as, we don't want these, what the language was, we don't want these thugs humming peace rocks through our windows. So that's what we were dealing with. And so there was a whole host of other folks that are involved, and we do need to do a better job. We've done, in terms of the coalition work, we've done parent coffee hours at the school. We've done going to the development, recognizing that families aren't going to come to us. And we've seen this with, BPDA and these groups that are doing these assessments as well, working around the families' needs, being innovative and going to meet them where they're at, not expecting, hey, there's a community meeting at noontime and we expect you to be there. So doing meetings at multiple times during the day, trying to get interpreter services when available, and really meeting families where they're at, going to the homes, going in the community, and sort of going to the different organizations in which parents are engaged with to send messages. So a lot of different work to try to engage families in this process as well, because we recognize that we really need to work with the entire family to be most effective.
Yeah. It's interesting to just hear you use the term townie, right? Because that just brings up, so that's one of those ingrained things that speaks to the division that still exists, because lots of people self-identify using that term with pride, and it has some very specific meanings and connotations. And so how you reconcile those folks and then the newer folks who've come in who are white or affluent or both, and the folks who are not in your community is really interesting. I think I'm waiting to see if we get one last question from the audience. I think one has popped up. Oh, Wen Hao, yay, great, thank you. So we have a couple here and I'm just gonna go quickly. So we have about 4 minutes left, folks. Wen Hao, I will go to you first. And your microphone is on. You should be good to ask your question.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. So I first apologize, I got in late, so I didn't hear the beginning part. But so my question is, it's only in the beginning. I'm an intermediate artist, and I discovered a significant mural behind a plastic tarp. This is in Boston, Chinatown. And upon research, this mural is quite significant in its local history. It's made in the 1970s. The hands painted this mural signify the beginning of the local grassroots activism. And I've done significant research on the details. So I would love to see that this plastic tarp, which was a really big one, and it's been there for over 10 years. So it seems better days, it should go. I am interested to your advice on the processes. I've never done this before. So I'm an artist in resident at the Powell Arts Center this year, and love to be able to do something in this scale for the community. So the property, the mural, which is covered by a gigantic tarp, plastic tarp, is sitting on the state's own property as a result of, as you described, neighborhood cut in half by creating an expressway. So that's my question. Any advice for going forward would be so appreciative.
I'm gonna throw that one to Kate. And she might give you a quick answer and then welcome you to follow up with us. But Kate, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, and I've already called in the lifeline. I know Karen Goodfellow is here as one of the attendees. I think this is a mural that is covered up. I think I know exactly where it is. If it's state property, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation is the agency that needs to be petitioned, and I know Powell Arts Center has a very strong, political presence in Chinatown. I would start first with Powell Arts Center and reaching out to the other Chinese American organizations within Chinatown. I think what we're hearing here over and over again is the power of the community's voice, especially if there's youth involved. And to go to Mass DOT to see what the status is. I'm going to assume that if it's been covered for that long, it's in disrepair and may need to be touched up. So there's a whole process of applying for grants and doing that. But I don't think it's impossible. If Karen wants to jump in and say anything, she's more than welcome. But we can help you and how. I think she might be able to come on. Karen, if you can, or Mary Liz, can you turn Karen's microphone on? That'd be great. Karen, thanks for doing this. I know you're in a million other things. So do you have recommendations for how to go about restoring this mural on state property?
Sorry, Karen, I keep getting you right. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, am I good now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I am happy to look at this. So is this the sampan mural that we're talking about on the vent?
Correct.
Yes. Correct.
Indeed.
So I've actually looked at some emails, I've been on a chain of emails has been shared with me. I don't see your name on the emails, but you might be part of the conversation. But it's, it's got a really long history, and it looks like there had been some verbal commitments to pay for the care, but nothing was done in writing. So it sounds like it's a pretty tricky situation. I know we had looked at some possibilities with us, the grant that we usually would be doing murals with over summers. We've already closed that grant, the Transformative Public Art Grant, but that might be something that we would be able to help fund if we can do that again for next summer. The other thing I think that we wanted to recommend, and I believe a colleague of mine had shared it with someone to pass back down. We shared it with Lisa from our Neighborhood Services department who was passing it through, but we were recommending applications to the Brown Fund and the Henderson Foundation to help fund it, because it does look like it might be some significant work to happen. And I know there had been questions about whether a youth group could be involved, and I know they were on the first version, but that given the scale of the work that needs to be done, it does seem like there needs to be fundraising for it, because it's not city property. It's a little harder for us, but we thought maybe it could be explored whether or not CPA funds would be possible. I know they're not used to commission new artworks, but we wondered if they might be used for, community preservation. And so we had recommended that as well. So
Thank
basically,
you, Karen.
the recommendations
Can I follow up with
the funding,
Karen?
and we'd be happy to come back to you if you want. You can write to us at bac@boston.gov. And we can,
is it BAC at Boston?
yeah, so you can write there, but I know that we have sent these recommendations out before, so I can share them with you again.
I appreciate it.
But because it's on our property, it is a little bit harder for us.
Karen, thank you so much for coming in and doing that for us. It's I want to underscore that our work at Now and There is temporary for these reasons, and there's pros and cons. We don't have to worry about the maintenance plan and what happens after, maybe even the artist is gone. But and I think it leaves room for new youth. And I just want to try and use that to wrap up this conversation, to thank our guests. Some of the takeaways that I've come from this conversation with is, sort of first and foremost to put down the remote and, stop watching all the stereotypes, to get proximate, as Sarah and Mswati are saying. There isn't really anything to fear. We just might not know someone else that doesn't look like us. I love the idea of the youth voices being the sort of anchor and center of projects going forward. They are our future. I thank you guys for being here. I wish this conversation could go on and on and on. We didn't even touch on memorializing, and that's just such a hot topic right now, which I know we will come back to it Now and There. So to wrap, I want to thank you all for, again, your time, your wisdom, your honesty throughout this. I also always want to make sure we thank those funders who have been with us for their ongoing support. That includes NEFA's Fund for the Arts and the Boston Foundation. We will be dropping a link in the chat. We want to make sure that these conversations are useful, get you inspired to go out and do something. And so if you fill that out, that would be very helpful for us. And I do hope that you will come back here next Thursday on June 25th, same time, 12:30, same format. We will be asking the question, what does East Boston need right now? Some similarities between these cities that are somewhat isolated. And we will be joined by special guests, Veronica Robles and Gladys Olivieros. They'll be with us to talk about East Boston. We will drop the registration link in the chat box. You've got a whole week to sign up. As always, we are here for follow-up, and wish you a very pleasant and productive day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks again. Have a nice day.